Hey, Awesomes. Instructor Corey here. Welcome to our video here on how to organize the literature review. By way of friendly reminder, we are on our APA formatting page. Recall this is our title page, a double space. We've got our page number up here. We've got our title. We've got some 3 or 4 spaces here, one space here, our information, our institution's information, the class, instructor, date. Top of the next page, we have abstract centered. Obviously, our page numbers are continuing. Then we've got our abstract written here with our keywords. And now by page 3, we're ready to start writing our paper. We've got our title centered, bold here. One return key, keeping everything centered. Keeping everything double spaced. For this one, we're going to indent, right? Our paragraph indentation starts here. We've got our introduction that we've gone over, and now it's time for our literature review. And so to keep in mind here, we went over headings and seriation for APA, but this is a Title I heading, right? It's bold, centered. A Level 2 heading, right? It's a subheading underneath the main heading. It is bold, flush left. And then subheading underneath that is going to be flush left, bold, but italicized. And so literature review is part of the introduction of an APA paper generally. Sometimes it's its own thing, and then the literature review can be its own paper. But for our purposes here, literature review is going to be part and parcel of the introduction. So we're going to signify it here with a subheading with literature review. And the first thing we really need to do before we actually start writing anything is how we're organizing the literature review, right? So if you've done an annotated bibliography or you've mapped out your sources, maybe hopefully you've already started getting a feel for how these things are, how the authors in your sources are talking about your topic. And maybe you're starting to realize too that there might be some ways that you can organize those, and that's kind of where we want to start. For the most part, an organization here is what we don't want to do is just go author A says, that's a paragraph, and then paragraph 2 author B says, and author 3. They're not in conversation with one another, right? B, it's boring and bland, and it doesn't really help our audience understand why we chose those sources or why those sources are relevant and credible. So let's highlight and look at this sentence right here. The primary purpose of a literature review is to demonstrate your familiarity of your topic using relevant, credible, and scholarly sources. Okay. The other things, we want to organize our literature review into themes, not authors. And I would advise choosing from one of the following. And these are some of the 3 biggest ones that I have used. And as I say in the hint right here, choose one that's going to help your audience best understand how you're talking about your topic and your approach to your topic. And if you're writing a specific argument, and if that argument insinuates or seems to talk about something in a particular type of way, depending on what your argument is or your analysis, then it might help guide you or lead you into kind of one of these 3 groupings for organizing your literature review. So the first one being chronological here. Not to oversimplify this, but it's literally putting them in a chronological order from the oldest source to the newest source. Oftentimes these are used or best suited for research projects when the topic and how you're approaching the topic is showing, say, hey, this and such has happened over time. And today it looks like this, perhaps, right? Or the things that are happening today, we need to address them because they have changed over time is one example. So you would use subheadings to break those up, right? And those subheadings are going to be subheadings of your literature review. So they would be in bold, flush left, and they would be italicized. So here's a couple of examples right here, okay? So let's say that you're writing one about terrorism, and let's say that for the way that you're approaching the topic of terrorism, you're going to make an argument, or you are performing an analysis that has to do with things that we missed in the past, perhaps things that we maybe caught since then, and things that what the future maybe needs to look like, let's say. So you could have subheadings before 9/11, after 9/11, and of course, obviously, there are many other events, okay, that could be of importance depending on the literature that you have, especially if they're talking about specific events. The same would go if you were writing about school shootings before Columbine, right, after Sandy Hook, right, or whatever, what are there things that change, right? So in that particular scenario, it might be, okay, gun laws. You're tracing gun laws and how they are looked at and how they need to change and how nothing has happened or too much has happened or whatever your particular sources and how they're talking about it would also help you how you might group those and organize them. All right, then there's kind of this, I say methodological, it's kind of methods and methodological. Let's say that you're looking at a particular topic, and let's say that the thing that you're noticing is like, here's a group of my sources that all use surveys, right? And they're coming to maybe a particular conclusion. Here's one that they all do interviews and they're arriving at a particular conclusion. Now, let's say here's one with observations and they're all arriving at a particular conclusion. Here's some that did experiments or whatever. And so let's say that within those, let's say that you decide, what's going to make the most sense is if I break these up by how they were done. So you've got surveys, interviews, observations, experiments. Maybe it's just surveys, interviews, and observations. Maybe it's surveys and experiments. And you say, okay, we're missing interviews, we're missing observations, right? And that's so it'd be good to organize your literature review based on how your sources approached the topic. This last one I kind of lump into some will say this thematical is different than theoretical, and while that is true, and necessarily in purely definitional terms, they're all kind of, you're still grouping them together based on what I call camps of thought that create these subtopics for you to then think about organizing your literature review, okay? So, for example, let's say that you have one here, you say you're doing school shootings again, and let's say that you could approach the topic by number of shooters, right? Maybe you see something that is different. Maybe there's 1 versus 2 or whatever the case is. Ages of the shooters. Maybe you see that a lot of your sources are splitting this up like older, elementary versus, high school or junior high, something like that, right? Then you could split those up accordingly. Perhaps the number of victims, right? Or it could be even, let's say you're doing a psychological approach and maybe it's depression, right? And then they're also talking about, well, maybe this bullying is a factor, or it's paranoia, or it's other types of mental illnesses or mental states or something like that, right? Just then you could organize, right, your literature review based on how not just only how your sources are talking about them or using that information, but also how it makes sense to what you're going to be saying, what you want to say, or what your overall argument and whatever serves for your analysis. Okay, so choose the right organizational method. Present your literature review based on what is most relevant, and more than that, what is going to be most beneficial to your audience, understanding why you chose those sources and how those sources have an effect and mean something to your overall paper. All right, guys, I hope you found that helpful and beneficial. That is how to organize your literature review. If you have any questions, just let me know.